Ed Gonzalez, Harris County Sheriff. I'm joined here by several of my teammates with the Harris County Sheriff's Office. To my right, we have Major Dean. Behind me, we have Captain Wine. We have Assistant Chief Tommy Diaz. We have Major Jesse Razzo and Major Saul Suarez. This morning at approximately 10:50 a.m., our deputies received a call for service regarding an abandoned vehicle. There was an abandoned vehicle that was spotted pretty much near the middle of the roadway with its doors wide open, just left unattended. That call was received at approximately 10:50 a.m., a little bit after 11 a.m., at about 11:02 to be exact. Our deputy arrived here on the scene, and as he began just beginning to understand what was going on, he heard some shots that were fired inside the residence. He immediately made an announcement of that and notified the dispatcher. Additional units arrived on the scene, and once they arrived on the scene, again, within a few minutes, they began hearing additional shots coming from inside the house, but this time they were shooting out through a window towards our deputies. At that point, nobody had been hurt. They began to set a perimeter, began to make sure that they were calling out our crisis negotiation team as well, just because now this was turning into potentially a barricaded suspect situation that was unfolding, and they wanted to make sure that we had every resource here available, not only for the safety of our deputies, but also for the safety of the person or persons that may be inside. And so they secured the perimeter at that point. While they were securing the perimeter and were outside, a male suspect exited the residence. Believe he was still armed at that time. Deputies opened fire at that point, and the male was struck. He was subsequently pronounced deceased here at the location. I want to say that we've had previous calls for services here at this location. Most have been related to either domestic disturbance type calls as well as other mental health related type calls. We do not have a full confirmation on the individual at this point. That'll be part of the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences that will handle that. But at this point, we believe the male to be a male, 45 years of age. And so at this point, again, we don't have a full confirmation, and we also like to make sure that we allow for some time to try to notify next of kin as well. Again, none of the deputies were hurt during this incident. Approximately, we believe 5 deputies in total fired shots. 3 are from patrol deputies, and 2 were canine deputies that were on the scene. They range in years of service from 3 years all the way to 29 years of service, so all are experienced deputies. And that's the initial information we have. I always like to just preface or say or remind everyone this is still our preliminary. We just want to share with you the information we have at this point, but obviously there will be some additional follow-up investigation to really tighten up the timeline, exactly what happened, and try to gather more information. I do also want to add information that it's still an active scene. When our deputies began making entry into the house just to make sure nobody else was wounded. If you remember, I mentioned that shots were also fired inside the house. They immediately had to retreat because one of the deputies saw some different wires that were laid out inside the home. And so we developed some possible information that there could be perhaps some booby traps or some additional booby traps for additional either weapons, or it could be some type of a bomb or something like that. So again, we have the perimeter under control right now. There's no further harm to the community at this point, but we do have the professionals on scene. And again, very fortunate to have such a high caliber both SWAT and bomb team. I mentioned the crisis response team earlier as well. These are resources that we have so that when incidents do arise like this, that we could still respond at moment's notice to anything that were to happen in Harris County. So we're glad we have the trained professionals on the scene. So to some extent, that part is still active. Like I said, the male is deceased on scene, and our condolences go out to his family as well. We don't know what prompted him doing this today. Again, we have received some preliminary information. If it is the individual involved, there may have been some potential mental health, PTSD-related issues in the past. We also believe, again, if it's the individual that we believe, he did have an open felony warrant for narcotics that was still an open warrant at this time. And so that's the initial information that we have. Briefly in Spanish, and then I'll answer any questions. Esta mañana recibimos una llamada a esta comunidad aproximadamente a las 10:50 de la mañana de que un carro estaba completamente abandonado en la vía de tráfico. Al llegar nuestro primer oficial comenzó a investigar, inmediatamente escuchó disparos dentro de una de las casas. Él anunció, llegaron más oficiales y entonces alguien dentro de la casa comenzó a disparar contra los oficiales de dentro de la casa. Ninguno de nuestros oficiales fue herido. Entonces, a responder, estaban aquí manteniendo control del área fuera de la casa para que no saliera el individuo y corriera peligro a alguien más, pero salió el hombre, el individuo, y a nuestros oficiales le tuvieron que disparar en defensa de ellos mismos para protegerse porque ya habían visto disparos, y en ese entonces es cuando el hombre recibió heridas de nuestros oficiales. 5 oficiales en total dispararon, y el sujeto fue herido aquí y perdió su vida aquí en la escena. Entonces nuestras oraciones van a su familia también. Sabemos que alguien perdió aquí su vida y siempre es algo traumático. Vamos a investigar exactamente qué pasó hoy. No sabemos qué resultó en esto. El individuo, si pensamos que es el mismo individuo, parece ser un hombre de 45 años de edad. Parece que tiene un orden de arresto de felonía, nivel ya grave, que estaba todavía abierto esa orden de arresto. Y es la información que tenemos en este momento. Any questions at this point?
Can you explain what's happening now in terms of, like, is there a bomb squad? What about the neighbors nearby? Have they been told to leave? Nobody's in danger?
At this point, we've called additional personnel. Obviously, it's a complex scene now that, with anytime any of our deputies fires their weapon in this type of situation, there's going to be an expanded investigation with members of the district attorney's office and others that arrive here for that, and obviously crime scene as well as homicide that will be investigating the broader case. But being that our deputies observed and developed some information that perhaps it could be booby-trapped inside, obviously we need to render the location safe because others can go in to begin processing everything until that gets done, and we also want to make sure that there's no further threat to any of the additional neighbors. The residents around have already been evacuated from their location, so there's no one else in harm's way other than the professionals here from the sheriff's office that are on scene and are deploying a strategy to see how they could go in there and make sure everything is safe, because we did receive some information that it could potentially either be booby-trapped, we're not saying it is, and that there could potentially be even like a grenade inside the house, and so we want to make sure we proceed with caution. So we're gonna take our time here. There's no need to rush at this point. So you're still going to be seeing additional activity because to some extent it's still technically an active scene, and we want to make sure also that no one else is wounded inside the house.
So you haven't been able to confirm that there was anyone else inside the house when this guy arrived?
We have not been able to confirm that other than just the mail that's down. We don't have any additional information to believe. Our understanding just from neighbors is that the individual that lived there lived alone, and so we do not have, but we never know. I mean, that's why I said it's all preliminary until we could gather more information. But the residents have to be safe before we could enter to make sure we're protecting our deputies and support personnel that are out here.
You talked about the man. You said believed he had PTSD. So does he have like military experience at all?
Again, it's all preliminary because I don't want to, just confirm that it's the same individual, because we need our partners at the Institute of Forensic Sciences to come out and handle that part. But the individual we believe to be the individual that resides here, if it's indeed him, we understand there's a prior history of some PTSD, possible military service, and it's a mental health history here at the location. But again, it's still all preliminary until we can confirm his identity of who we're dealing with exactly. And again, the individual that we're referring to as well does have an open felony warrant at this time.
And how many deputies fired their weapons?
A total of 5 fired their weapons. 3 were patrol deputies and 2 were K-9 deputies.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could go over again, because you said he was firing from inside the house. Do we know if he was firing when he left the house?
What we know at this point is it was a sequence of events that upon arrival, our deputy spotted the vehicle that's still parked in front of the residence as we speak. That was just basically abandoned, doors open. It appears that vehicle came back registered to that location, and we believe to the individual, the homeowner. it was just abandoned there. And so we began receiving calls for that. Our deputy arrived on scene pretty quickly after that. Call was received at approximately 10:50, arrived at approximately 11:02. This could have gone in an extremely worse way, because our deputy was about to go and inquire with the listed home, and that's when the shots rang out, and he heard shots at that point. He put the information out, didn't rush or anything, was methodical in his approach and waited for backup to arrive, as was the correct thing to do. And upon other units arriving, they began hearing additional shots, but this time it appeared to be from a window, I believe, out towards where the deputies were at. So now it was beginning to escalate. So they got our crisis negotiation team en route, began to set a perimeter, because at that point, you have people walking their dogs, other things are happening, so they need to maintain a perimeter. Then at some point after that, while they're just not forcing the issue, just using restraint and staying back, was when the male exited the vehicle. I don't know if he was armed or if he fired. That part we have not determined that yet. But when he exited towards them, that's when shots were fired towards the male, and he was wounded and subsequently pronounced deceased here at the scene.
So he was killed outside the
Outside the home. He came out of the house, correct.
So,
Did you see anyone inside the residence?
We don't know if there's anybody inside the residence. They heard shots, and then later the shots were directed towards the deputies through, I believe, some type of window or opening in the house. Shots were fired at the deputies once they had the perimeter set. No sé, aproximadamente 45 años, no sé su herencia, no sé su raza ni nada de eso.
Do you know what type of weapon was
Are
used?
they inside the house? Are they being inside the house?
I'm sorry?
Inside?
Not yet. Like I was saying, we're securing it because we had information believed it could be booby trapped, or there could be additional. There was evidence that the house was potentially booby trapped, which is a unique but dangerous element to it, because somebody could go in there, trigger something, and it could be catastrophic. So and so we're trying to just make sure that there's not that we don't have those elements going on before we could fully process the scene.
Do you know what type of weapon was it? Was it assault rifle, handgun?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I've heard different things, but I don't want to speculate yet, because I really haven't confirmed that part yet.
so was there at any point, you said there was a crisis negotiation team called, but was there any talks between the suspect and deputies before he came out of the house?
I don't think there was an opportunity to establish that, because things kind of unfolded right from the get-go. And again, thankfully none of the deputies were hurt, but one of the initial deputy saw what he had, and it's a not fairly innocent type of routine call, but it's just an abandoned vehicle, and trying to say, hey, what happened? Like, the car's out here, what's going on? And upon, it was about to make entry into the house, not entry, but approach the house, when he heard the first shots ring out. Nobody spoke to my knowledge or anything like that. He just retreated, waited for backup. Backup came, and then somebody started shooting. So at that point, it's just safety right at that point. And we're retreating, let's set a better perimeter. This could go a number of ways. We don't know if there's other people in the house. So they're just trying to gather their thoughts and formulate a plan. And I don't think if there was ever a time to maybe establish any kind of communication. Maybe they attempted, I just don't know. But they did call our crisis negotiation team to start making their way down here. But I don't think that they were able to arrive here on time for that it wasn't, it just didn't happen.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? We're good? Ahorita nos hablamos. Ahorita.